I hear you, man. So, life after football for you, when you hung your pads up and your cleats up, the trials and tribulations that come along with the game of football, how have you applied those things to your personal life?
Absolutely. I know it's when you're immersed in the NFL and when you transition from college, it's this daily, it becomes your job. And there's a transition for a lot of guys. It takes different amounts of time to come to that realization, like, this is my job. This is how I provide for my family. This is how I kind of create the foundation for what happens after football. There's a lot of programs, a lot of resources, a lot of communication about life after football while you're in the NFL. But I'm telling you, most guys don't pay too much attention to that because they're focusing on the next game, and each week is full of information that you're trying to digest and memorize and prepare and get ready for this game. That all this talk about after football, it's an afterthought. And so a lot of guys don't put a lot of energy into it. Some guys go, you know what, when I'm done with football, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I wasn't one of those guys. I had a lot of things that I was kind of kicking around what I wanted to do. But I got to the point when I ended with Cincinnati, my body was pretty beat up. My knees were a little rough. So I just kind of wanted to take some time to decompress. And so I was kind of just enjoying with my young kids and going to the zoo and doing stuff with them. And then springtime rolled around, and a buddy of mine who was coaching at the high school I went to was like, "Hey, do you want to get into you want to coach high school football?" And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I was kind of burnt out of football just from a mental aspect. And I was like, you know what, I'll do you a solid. I'll come by a couple times a week and kind of help with the offensive line where I can. And that started to kind of re-stoke the fire for football for me. And so started helping out and volunteering at my high school. Had a pretty decent year, helped a kid get a scholarship to Boise State, which was really cool. And just it kind of, like I said, it sparked this fire for teaching football that I didn't know existed. And that following year, our coach became the AD and asked if I want to be the head coach. And I was like, no, bud, like, I'm not ready for going from a volunteer level to like being the guy. And so he's like, okay, well, we'll bring someone on as an interim head coach, and will you at least be the offensive coordinator? I said, sure, I'd love to do that. Because I mean, I'm watching film of a high school, and you kind of see like, oh man, we can run power here, or if we check to this protection because the safeties are rotated, like, we're going to light them up. And so I had a lot of fun doing that. About the same time, a buddy of mine who played center at Arizona State, kind of a class before me, he went to the NFL when I went to ASU. Scott Peters, who's now coaching the NFL with the Cleveland Browns, had started this company called Safe Football. And he had created this contact kind of skill development program that created better football players, but the idea was to limit contact to the head, because as a lineman, I was taught to use my helmet as like a one of 3 points to strike my opponent, to move them. But at that time, the concussion crisis, all the movies, the CTE conversation in football was at an all-time high. Participation in high school youth football was becoming all-time low. And so he created this program that was working with high schools and youth programs to better educate coaches on contact skills. And so I started following him around to these clinics and these camps with these programs. And I got really intrigued by it, because I was one of those former pros who said, you know what, when my kids get old enough, I don't want them playing football. I don't want them going through the same I don't want them hiding concussions like I did just to be on the field, or the orthopedic injuries that I've gone through. But it wasn't until I started really understanding this program that I'm like, you know what, maybe there is hope for my kids to play football in a better manner than I did. And I don't blame my coaches for how I was taught, because you only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. And so now that we have different information, we can maybe have a different impact on the game. So I got to this crossroads in my life where you know what, I can stick here with this high school football coaching gig and become the next head coach and be here for the next few decades. I know I kind of have an idea of what that path looks like. But then here's another path that is completely terrifying, that is not guaranteed. There's nothing there, and I'm doing things that put me outside of my comfort zone, doing things I've never done before. Traveling, I would have to travel all over the country, be away from my family. But I took a kind of a leap of faith, and now we've rebranded a little bit to, our company's called Tip of the Spear. And so now we work with youth football all the way up to current NFL teams and players, and teaching them contact skills that eliminate helmet contact. So every program that we've worked with have reduced concussions, have reduced the magnitude of the helmet impacts. They've been a part of like helmet accelerometer studies. But what's cool is it's performance based. So a lot of coaches take some sort of coaching certification, right? I got to take this course to be able to coach my youth kids football team or high school. But our program is creating better football players. So how do we take someone who's used to hitting with their heads and teaching them how to create contact from the hip? So I've been able to take everything I've learned in football, adding in some new information, and kind of created a new pathway in my life that I didn't know existed. And I feel like, I know has helped the programs that we worked with, but in a bigger picture, that I can give back to the game that has given me so much.
Yes, sir. Hey, it's great to see that you're doing great things. Hey, isn't Sean Springs another one that's working on the helmet side of football?
Yeah, there's a lot of different guys and different companies that have created new technologies and new advancements in helmets. There's a lot of advancements in the diagnostic tools for recognizing and even treating concussion symptoms. But we're trying to look at this from like the front end, right? And so
Yes,
you and
sir.
I, our cars that we drive today, the airbags are probably exponentially better than the first car that we ever drove, right? When we did our driver's test. But we don't crash our car on purpose to test the efficacy of how safe that new airbag is. What we do is we try to employ better defensive driving kind of maneuvers and be more alert, putting down devices, so we don't have to rely on those safety mechanisms. That's kind of our philosophy with Tip of the Spear, is we want to have a better understanding of how our body operates for contact, so we don't have to be reliant on that safer helmet. That's important, don't get me wrong. It's important to be able to diagnose and treat these head neck injuries after they occur, but if we can reduce the amount of contact situations to the helmet, how many head neck injuries exist, then it's kind of a win-win. So you're able to create a better performing player on the front end, and then it's going to yield a safety benefit as well.